Number 35 by Joshua Osto. I've lived on Lonsdale Road my whole life. My brother lives across the street and 3 doors down, in the house that we both grew up in. When I married Harry, I made sure we moved onto Lonsdale Road. It wouldn't feel right to live anywhere else. And birds of a feather need to stick together, they say. But there's been so much trouble these last years to do with number 37. Then Harry let me down, Christmas just gone, after the party at Devon's, sucking on that young girl's ear like some kind of pervert. He was drunk though, and thought it was all a laugh. I thought it was all over. A year before that, they arrested Cresswell. They found all sorts in the basement, stuff that you wouldn't want to think of. Not just bodies, but bits of bodies. Some people said that they weren't surprised that Cresswell had one of those faces. Not like my Harry, who has the face of a naughty cherub. It's because I've led a blameless life, he says to me. He's a cheeky one. Cresswell kept to himself pretty much. No friends. After they took him away, number 37 was empty for a long while. None of us on the street knew what to feel about it, really, because we didn't like the house standing empty. But then we weren't sure that we wanted someone to move into it either. It's creepy, Harry said. It gets into people's thinking. We don't want it empty too long, Tess. We want things to get back to how they were. My brother, Wilfred, agreed. It's a reminder, Wilf said. We need a nice young couple to move in there. We didn't get a nice young couple, though. That man with the ratty face moved in. I wonder if he's one of those murder fans, Harry mused. I told him to drink his tea and stop worrying about it. The house had someone in it now, and that was a good thing. We live at number 35, you see, which is right next door to number 37. The ratty-faced man came round after a couple of days. He brought us some wine as a gift, but Harry and I stay away from drink mostly, so we said to him that was very nice, but we'd rather have some tea and digestives. We invited him in. My name's Tony, he said. Harry was just staring at him funny, so I told Tony what our names were. I gave him a look over while he ate our digestives. His fingernails looked like they could do with some attention. Underneath each nail was dark with dirt. I almost slapped the biscuit out of his hands and told him to go and wash them. His t-shirt had paint marks on it. You a decorator by trade, then? I asked him. He shook his head. No. I work at the yard, he said. I drive a forklift. You've got paint on your clothes, I told him. Just sorting out the house, he said. You know how it is. We knew how it was. Everyone knew how it was. He didn't stay long and we were glad when he left. Agatha and Chrissy were round 10 minutes later. What's he like? Agatha asked. Is he simple? Chrissy asked. I heard he's simple. Cresswell was simple. Duncan Cresswell, before he was arrested and all of the body parts were found in his house, used to sit on the swing in his unmown back garden and sing to himself. He used to buy his food at the corner store, same every time. Beef and tomato pot noodle, 2 cans of Tennant Super, a packet of hobnobs. It was a wonder he hadn't died of scurvy. He's not simple, I said. Chrissy looked disappointed. He looks like a rat though, doesn't he? She said a few minutes later, her face brightening. Yes, he does, I agreed. He could use a shave. You don't surprise me, Agatha said. No self-respecting man would move into that house. You mark my words, there'll be trouble. Harry sat in the corner while we talked. Those two are idiots, he said, after Agatha and Christie had gone. I don't know why you give them the time. Well, thank the Lord Almighty for idiots, I said, feeling cross with him, and stood up. I'm going to make some dinner. Oh, sausages? He asked hopefully, but I was still angry. No, I told him, we're having chips and nuggets. He made a face, went back to his paper. Tony's name was Anthony Bouvier. The postman gave us a parcel to give to him, so we saw his name. You can't steam them like you used to, but whatever was inside didn't weigh much. Anyway, having a French surname didn't help Tony's popularity any. Right-minded people don't have much time for France, and Chrissy had once had her heart broken by a French exchange student back in her school days. Serves her right, Harry said, cozying up with a frog muncher. I just let those sort of comments slide off me back then. That was before he had too much to drink at Devon's party and started sucking on that girl's ear. He shouldn't have got drunk, is what I say. But Wilf has taken care of it, and there'll be none of that from now on. Wilf doesn't like bother. I don't know why you married that loony, Wilf said to me only last week. Well, you introduced us, I reminded him. Wilf got one of his black looks, and I could see his hands trembling. But there was nothing he could say, and he knew it. Anyway, I was talking about Tony Bouvier. Well, whatever decorating he was doing was a mystery to the rest of us. He stripped the walls all right, but he didn't start painting them again for over a month. After 2 months, one wall in the living room was brilliant white, and the rest were just grey plaster with old pieces of wallpaper sticking to them. You could see bottles and cans lying around on the carpet in the living room as well. The same carpet from when Cresswell lived there. We went around the back to look in the kitchen, and there were dirty plates piled up in the sink like a leaning tower of pizzas. He hasn't even changed the locks, Harry noticed. I didn't like that, I can tell you. He's not right, Agatha said. He's another Cresswell, you mark my words. What kind of man moves into a house like that? Chrissy didn't agree. He's not like Cresswell. Cresswell was simple. I used to run into Cresswell in the street. He had large, wet eyes, like a cow's eyes. Sometimes he would have forgotten to tie his shoelaces. Sometimes I wonder how he did it, Agatha said. If brains was money, he couldn't buy a box of matches. But he confessed, Chrissy said, saving me the trouble. Every year, Devon Elliot would throw a Christmas party. We all liked to be invited. Once he had one of those actresses from Coronation Street there. Caused quite a bit of excitement, even if she didn't stay much more than an hour. I think her husband killed her in the end. On the television, I mean. Devon's wife's called Mary. Although she's a good 15 years younger than him, which puts her about 40, I would guess, she's a quiet little thing. Her niece was visiting when the Christmas party came round, and that young miss couldn't be more different to her aunt. She was a pretty one, but tarty. She didn't seem to want to talk to the other women as much as the men. Look how red her mouth is, Harry said, plucking a glass of wine off the sideboard. Should you be drinking? I asked him, but he didn't seem to hear me. Look at her clothes, he said. What a little slut. He finished his wine and reached for another one. I looked around for Wilf, but he hadn't arrived yet. It was up to me. I don't think you should be drinking, I said to Harry. I think you should give me that glass. He looked at me with dead eyes, and I could sense him go very still. I went off then, seething and concerned, to talk to Agatha and Chrissy. Tony had arrived and was talking to Willie Pearce. He seemed shifty, moving from foot to foot. But after a few minutes he laughed and patted Willie on the shoulder. That wasn't like Cresswell. When you spoke to Cresswell, he looked at you sheepishly, with worried eyes, and kept saying, "I don't know. I don't know," he would say. "I don't know. I don't know." I tried to keep an eye on Harry. I tried to keep an eye on Mary's niece as well. But an hour later I saw them standing together. And not long after that I couldn't see either of them. "Have you seen Harry?" I asked Devon. He's had a few too many, your fella. Going to get a bit of air, I wouldn't be surprised. He winked at me as if he'd been talking in innuendos. I went out into the street. I knew where Harry would be. The lights were on in the basement of number 37. The door was round the back. I cursed Tony then for not having changed the locks. Mary's niece was already dead when I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Harry was naked, smeared in blood. He had something in his mouth that he was happily sucking away on, like a baby with a dummy. And when he saw me, he opened wide for me to see. The girl's ear dropped out onto the basement floor. "Oh, Harry!" I exclaimed. "You said you were going to stop this nonsense." He was in a rapture, his eyes shining with innocent joy. With a bloodied forefinger, he kept poking the dead girl's face, her head rocking emptily back and forth. "I've done another one, Tess," he said merrily. "I've done another one. Ain't I bad?" I thought about it. I always had to be the level-headed one. First with father and Wilf, and then with my own husband. "No," I said sternly, "it wasn't you. It was that dirty little man." "What sort of man moves into a killer's house, Harry, eh? What sort of a man does that?" "I've got a big stiffy," Harry said, showing me. I wasn't that interested. I was working things through, like I did before. Wilf would help again, cleaning things up here. He didn't want the attention any more than I did. I'd go back to the party and get Tony drunk. I'd wait until we were alone and then whisper to Agatha and Chrissy that he'd lunged at me. Everyone would know it had happened then, and it wouldn't be long before Chrissy had persuaded herself he'd done the same to her, or she'd seen it happen, or anything she could make up that put her in the middle of the story. I'd let her take the attention. Harry and me had told people we'd seen Tony with that girl. Wilf would help me take care of it. "Come on, Harry," I said. I could see that he was calming down, and soon he'd be able to follow me. "Come on, and we'll get you all cleaned up. You need to be presentable. Where'd you put your clothes?" "I don't know," he said, shaking his head and grinning up at me, just like he'd been caught stealing chocolate. "I don't know. I don't know."